Today on Locked On Canadiens, let's talk about Habs clinching scenarios.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Canadiens. Our boys are back in town, and so am I, and we're going to talk a lot about lots of Habs stuff today. But first, this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. My name is Laura Saab, also known as The Active Stick, and I'm joined, as always, by the wonderful Ian Poivert, also known as Maybe It's Ian. Ian, how are we doing today? The Habs are inching closer and closer to the playoffs. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, we have a magic number, which is, for those who are unaware, a number of points that either you gain or your opponent that is challenging you for that spot loses, that will get you into the show. Before we jump too far, I want to briefly touch on our contest before we get too deep into this. First of all, holy cow, the response has been incredible. It is currently about 8 o'clock on Monday. If you have submitted a response by then, it has been recorded. So thank you. You do not need to keep peppering us with contest entry. Just one is good enough. We have over 50 people who have signed up for this contest so far. We've seen the numbers jump. We're very excited. Thank you for your support. As a reminder, you're playing for, at 4,500, a signed Josh Anderson photo, and at 5,000 subscribers, you are playing for an Arbor Xhekaj signed photo. So may the odds be ever in your favor, but also, more importantly, thank you for supporting us here on the show.
And so just a quick recap, if you were already subscribed, all you need to do is say contest entry in a comment on YouTube. And if you were not subscribed, first subscribe and then say contest entry in a comment on YouTube. A lot of you have been submitting questions with that as well, which we adore. We love mailbag questions. So please go ahead and do that. But, you know, I guess you can consider the playoffs a type of contest. And the Canadiens are getting pretty close to it. At the time that we are recording this, it pains us, but we are cheering for Tampa, and we've had to do this a number of times over the last couple of weeks. The other day we were rooting for the Devils, and that made me feel extremely gross. So let's talk about the Habs magic number in playoff clinching scenarios.
Yeah, so yesterday in the show I mentioned that I took a guess that it was around 8 points, and it is around 8 points. The Canadiens' magic number is 7. How you get to that number is you look at the teams that are below the Canadiens who still have a chance of catching them, or the ones who are closest to catching them, and you determine what their maximum amount of points they have left this season. So in the case of both the Detroit Red Wings, who have somehow climbed themselves back into this race, and the New York Rangers, they both max out at 91 points. So they have a maximum of 12 points left from where they are now, which is 71. So 91 gets them in, which means the Canadiens at 85 need to get to 92 to clinch their spot. That is if the Rangers and Red Wings win out. That's if they win every game between now and the end of the year. Spoiler alert, we're looking at this, as Laura said, while we're rooting for the Tampa Bay Lightning, who after the first period are up 3-0 on the New York Rangers. So we won't have to cheer for the Lightning long, but they seem to be doing us a solid so far. You will already know the answer to whether or not they won as you're listening to this, but we're keeping that in mind. Because with Montreal playing Detroit on Tuesday, there's a chance that the magic number goes from 7 to 3 in one night. And the reason for that is if the Rangers lose in regulation on Monday, and Montreal defeats the Red Wings in regulation on Tuesday, the Canadiens will have gained 2 points, and the Red Wings and Rangers would have lost 2 points, making 4 points, the difference between those, meaning the Canadiens would only need to pick up 3 points in their remaining 4 games to get in. So it's a big couple days for the Canadiens, as we've kind of said for the last 3 months. But in reality, like they keep getting bigger.
It's true. And we are going to talk a little bit about last week in our weekly recap, which we didn't do on the Sunday because there was too much going on. And then we will be doing our weekly preview where we break down each game this week. And it might be it's like next week is sort of the last week where we do this because there's going to be 2 games in that week. But it's going to be really interesting. But let's get back to what's the most likely scenario. The Canadiens have won 5 in a row. Are the odds really in their favor? Not so much.
Well, in what sense?
I feel like I was, every single time there's a team that you think is no longer challenging them for that spot, like the New York Rangers or the Islanders or Detroit or whoever or Columbus. Every time we felt that it was safe, one of those teams would experience a resurgence, right?
Yeah.
It even happened with Ottawa. Like Ottawa right now is like they've been sitting solidly in that first wild card spot for a while. But throughout the course of the season, there were points where they were slumping or Ullmark was injured or whatever. And every time you thought that the Canadiens had like gained on them, they would just experience a resurgence. So for me, I don't know how comfortable I feel right now with tomorrow's game. I think if the Canadiens do win tomorrow's game in regulation, I feel like it, it's the roof is going to come off the building.
Yeah, and it's all about just margin of error between now and the end of the season, right? A Rangers regulation loss on Monday and a Canadiens regulation win on Tuesday makes the margin of error for the Red Wings and the Rangers so small. It means that they can afford to lose just 3 points the rest of the season, or I should say, they have to win out the rest of the season and hope that the Canadiens only pick up 3 or fewer points.
Right.
I think it would have to be fewer points. 3 would get them in. Again, remember the tiebreakers here. It starts with regulation wins. The Canadiens might have the Red Wings beat in that. From what I can tell so far, the Red Wings are at 28, and so are the Montreal Canadiens. So if it happens to be the Red Wings, perhaps this last game between the two of them could be that deciding regulation win. But the Canadiens likely, in fact, I don't think it's possible at this. It isn't possible at this point. They will not have the regulation win tiebreaker over the Rangers. They're 4 wins back, so they would have to win every game in regulation to get that. And then the Rangers would have to lose every game in regulation, and at that point, that tiebreaker wouldn't matter because the Rangers need the points.
Right.
So, it's not so much a measure of regulation wins when it comes to beating the Rangers. It's just the points. So yeah, look, I mean, they're going to have to win 6 in a row if it's coming down to them beating the Detroit Red Wings on Tuesday. In regulation would be best. Obviously, I wouldn't be too upset with an overtime or shootout win, because that also means that the Red Wings can't pick up that tiebreaker. It's more valuable for the Red Wings to get that tiebreaker than it is for Montreal at this point because Montreal's ahead.
Yeah,
it is seeming more and more likely by the day that this team is in. That we're going to be watching playoff games this season, which is just, I still have not gotten used to that. I can't wait to be like, it's bad form to be talking about like how a playoff series plays out before you've even made it. But once that happens, I cannot wait to be doing that every day. Like that's so exciting for us to be able to talk about whoever they're going to play in the first round. You did mention Ottawa being comfortably in that first spot. You know who might not be so comfortable right now are the Florida Panthers. Yes, they've clinched a playoff spot, but they are 3-6-1 in their last 10. They are sitting at 92 points, and Ottawa is at 90. The Florida Panthers could very well fall into the wild card spot, which would deny us of a Battle of Ontario in the first round, which would be a bummer. However, it would be hilarious to see the Maple Leafs finally win their division, and their prize for doing so is playing the Florida Panthers, who at that point will probably have Tkachuk back. They'll be 2 games away from getting Ekblad back. Barkov will be back. Like, that's their prize. You finally won the division. Here you go, the defending Stanley Cup champion and back-to-back Eastern Conference champion Florida Panthers. That's really funny.
Who also eliminated you, right? Like,
yes.
They're also like...
The last time you fought,
single-handedly eliminated.
Yeah, him. I just see Radko Gudas yelling in. Was it Joseph Wall or was it? It was one of them. I think it was Wall or Samsonov, just yelling in his face as they scored the overtime winner in that game. Yeah, man, that's the way that this Gary's playoff system is dumb. It's stupid, and I don't like it. However, it's these kinds of matchups that we get to see all the time that kind of build that hatred. I would love everything to just stay as it is, but it would be cosmically funny if the Leafs finally win the division and they draw the reigning Stanley Cup champions. That's so funny to me.
I think so too, but I think the funniest thing would be if they get eliminated in the first round, no matter who
Yeah, for
they
sure.
end up playing. But that's the thing. It's like we all want a Battle of Ontario, whether you hate those teams or you love those teams, you want it. And also, if you are also in danger of playing them in a later round, you also want it, right? So you want those lineups as depleted as possible. Please note, I am not advocating for violence on this show. All right, so we're going to talk about our weekly recap. We kind of talked about it a little bit yesterday, but I want to talk about not just the player of the week, but the players of the week, the turning points of the week, and if there's anything that the Canadiens need to improve upon over last week. And we're going to get into that in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? I've definitely been doing that lately. Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it is easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery, Ubers, taxis, all of that. And now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling the multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right. So, for those of you who've not been listening lately, I was on vacation for the last 2 weeks. So, I actually missed all of the games that took place, and I watched them through highlights and experienced them through the group chat that we have with our former co host, Scott Matla. But we're going to do our weekly recap because it is Monday. We usually do these on Sunday. And there was too much excitement yesterday. There were too many good things, even though the Canadiens didn't play all that well against Nashville. So let's talk about our weekly recap. Ian, if I were to ask you what is the theme of last week, what would you say?
The word that came to mind was perfect, because they won every game, but like those games were far from perfect in a certain sense, especially the Nashville game, which I don't care that it wasn't perfect at all. It does not bother me in the slightest that on the second half of a back-to-back with travel, they looked tired, because of course they did.
They came away with 2 points.
It's okay. For those who might not follow me on Blue Sky, my mantra since they've gotten themselves back into this is just win. Nothing else matters. Doesn't matter if the Rangers lose or the Red Wings lose. Just win the games you have in front of you. And that was a perfect just win game. Like, I don't care how you did it, because guess what? It doesn't matter how you do it in the playoffs. Man, you won the first 2 games, on the road, but you got outplayed the whole time. Doesn't matter. I'm headed home with a 2-0 lead. Doesn't matter at all. Doesn't matter. Win the games. So, like, to me, the mantra for me for a while and for the rest of this season is just win. I don't care how you do it. I don't care how ugly it looks. That we are sacrificing process at this point for results, because the results matter.
Yes.
And it's very exciting to think that the results matter, depending on where you look to start the week. If we started on Sunday, we go Sunday to Sunday, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all 5 of their wins on their current win streak were in the last week. So awesome. Just really, really great stuff from a team that needed it. And they've padded their lead in that chase for a playoff spot. It's also funny because, they're going to play the Red Wings on Tuesday. This was supposed to be the Red Wings, right? The spot that the Canadiens are in was supposed to be the Detroit Red Wings or the Buffalo Sabres or the Ottawa Senators, who still managed to get in and take that next step. But it's just funny to think like we're keeping the Rangers out of the playoffs. Like, it's just that kind of week where they swept the table. And they're looking down at these teams who they shouldn't be contemporaries at this point. They should not be peers at this point in this team's rebuild. And it's just it to me, this was the perfect week to just look at and say, well, we swept the reigning Stanley Cup champions in a back-to-back and over the season series. We beat up on Boston, beat them in regulation for the first time in 6 years. We, had a bit of a slow start against Philadelphia, overcame it, didn't matter. And then against Nashville, just won. That's all that mattered. They just won.
Yeah.
Like it's an awesome week for a team that needed an awesome week, and they just keep getting better for us. It's really, really great.
And I think one of the biggest things is no matter what happens, this team was predicted to finish last in this division by so many people at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
We thought maybe a little bit higher than last just because of the in the mix thing, but I don't know if we were thinking that in the mix meant actually in the playoffs. I think we thought in the mix was where, maybe where the Rangers are, right? Maybe that's what we thought the mix was. And so I think it's quite incredible. So if I were to say if there's anything that they should improve upon over last week, the feeling that I get is their starts need to be better. But I don't know if we want to quibble over that because, as you pointed out on the last episode, the Canadiens are actually the best in the league at coming from behind in the third period. Correct.
Yeah. They shouldn't make a habit of that, if we can be honest. The terrible segment on TSN, have or have not. Well, this is a winning habit for the Canadiens right now, despite the fact that it probably shouldn't be a habit for them to be like, we're behind, whatever. It's so like college kid behavior to just be like, whatever, and then just like cram a day before the test and pull it off, which is exactly what this team is right now. They are a bunch of kids doing that sort of thing,
pulling all-nighters.
Yeah, exactly.
I do agree though. I think you can't be doing that in the playoffs, because in the playoffs every moment counts, right? You have so little time. You have a lot of games. There's you have to win 4 games, but you have so little time, and I think it's so important for them to improve upon their starts. If you this is the sense I'm getting, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. The feeling that I'm getting from the highlights and the commentary and all of that is that last week's player of the week was Lane Hutson.
Yeah, it's not, and I mean, maybe you could throw Nick Suzuki in there for sure, but it's Lane. It's Lane. He's 20 years old, and he recognizes the moment he's in more than any other player at his age, because a lot of players at his age aren't getting this moment, right? I think that's been the biggest boon for him in the Calder race, other than just his pure ability, is that, and all of these games matter tremendously for the team he's on. It's not just he's just picking up points at the end of the season, scoring on backup goalies because nobody takes his team seriously. Like, he's scoring, and they need him to score. If he's not scoring at the rate he does, this team's cooked, and he is. And that's to me the most fascinating part about this player, is that he stepped in to a role that we didn't think he was going to fill immediately. And there was some doubt that maybe he could ever do that at the NHL level by some people, but he steps in and does it. And the team needs him to be that guy. And he just gets better. Every game just gets better and better and better. I love to see that he's a rink rat. I know some people are like, they need to get him off the rink so he can rest. He's 20. He's fine. I'm not worried about that at all. He's having the time of his life right now. I don't think any of that matters too much. I will say the one part of the week that I think needs a bit of a lift for the Montreal Canadiens, the power play was dreadful. Very, very bad. They had 2 goals in that game in Florida. And then I don't know that they scored another power play goal all week. I'm trying to just quickly swipe. They had a shorthanded goal. Nick Suzuki's goal against Philadelphia was a shorty, but the power play, especially power play 1, has just kind of sucked any momentum out of them. That needs to improve. And I know you don't get a lot of power plays in the playoffs, but you need your power play to be good so that when you get them, you feel relatively certain that you can get a goal out of them.
Yeah.
I think that's been quietly very bad. Not even just, they're not scoring. It's bad.
It's bad.
And they need to fix it, but I'm not worried about it.
At the risk of inspiring Ian to do math, I just want our listeners to just think about all the times the Canadiens did go down in a game. And how Lane Hutson was the factor that turned it around, right? He was the catalyst for the goal or the play that turned it around and caused them to win. I think very few rookies get to be this consequential. and especially very few rookies who are not like a slam dunk number one overall elite player with superstar potential.
Yeah.
And he's so consequential. And I think that, to me, when I think about this season, and I know we're going to get into it in our weekly preview in our next segment, there's the record books are one thing, but the actual effect you have on the whole team and not just yourself it's not a unique situation, but it's such a magical moment. And I think that's, whatever happens, whether the Canadian, like, there's a chance they might not make the playoffs. It's a small chance, but they might not. Whatever happens, like, I think that this season, unless they write a different story in the postseason, this season was the season of Lane, I think.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to
1000%.
say that this season
Yeah.
was the season of Lane Hutson. A lot of people improved. A lot of people got better. A lot of people hit some milestones that we wanted them to. A lot of people, stepped up their game. There was also a lot of growth in terms of negative stuff as well. But
Yeah.
this season, to me, like, for all, like, that fourth line, Josh Anderson becoming a penalty killer, all of that, the story of this season is Lane Hutson, at hands down. Like, by
I
far.
mean, we knew Suzuki was going to be a pillar. We knew he was going to be a core part of this team. We knew Caulfield was. We knew Gooley was. Lane Hutson establishing himself as a cornerstone of this team's build for the next forever is a development that I don't know we were ready for this quickly.
Yeah.
And we didn't know he was ready for this quickly. It's astounding to see what he's done. He's locked. The collar's locked. Like, don't bother like worrying about that. He's going to walk to that trophy. It's just, I don't think he cares. I'll be honest with you. I think he cares way more about being in the playoffs and trying to win a Stanley Cup this year.
I also feel like this is something we would have expected of him, like, in year 3,
Yeah.
3 or 4. But I never tire of talking about Lane Hutson, so we're going to do that a little bit more because there's a massive potential story for this week, and we're going to talk about it in our Habs weekly preview up next. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the candidates faster. I've been in that spot where you need the right hire like yesterday. The pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a setback. That's exactly when Indeed's sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring Indeed is all you need. All right, it is time for a Habs weekly preview. We do this every Monday, and we're going to be doing it next Monday, and hoping that we get to do it the following Monday as well. It's almost the end of the season. The Canadiens have 3 games in a slightly awkward schedule this week, starting with Detroit visiting the Montreal Canadiens tomorrow night.
Yeah. The one thing that's jumping off the screen to me right now is we just talked a whole bunch about Lane Hutson. He's tied with Chris Chelios at 64 points. And wouldn't you know it, they're playing Chris Chelios' former team as well in the Detroit Red Wings. It'd be one great night to just get that last point and have that building erupt, and to do it, against the Red Wings, a team that Chris Chelios spent most of his NHL career with. It would just be really cool. He's going to do it. I do not think that Lane Hutson has it in him at this point in his career to go 5 games without a point. That just seems impossible given the way that he's playing. But look, like we said earlier when we were talking about the clinching scenario and the Canadiens' magic number, the Detroit Red Wings have kind of played themselves back into this. They're not, look, it's still, they are a long shot to get in, just as the Rangers are, because the Canadiens have taken that lead in the Eastern Conference playoff picture. But they're 3-1 in their last 5 to get here. They had a 4-3 loss against Ottawa, and then they've picked up points in their last 4 games. 2-1 win against Boston, 2-1 overtime loss to the St. Louis Blues, which, by the way, if you're taking any points against the St. Louis Blues right now, you just take them and you get out of town. That team is, poor Winnipeg. They're gonna have to play the Jets in the first, or the Blues in the first round, who are just lighting the world on fire. Anyway, that's a different conversation for
We
another day.
counted them out like as
Yeah.
recently as like, a month ago.
This seems to be their favorite thing, is to just be the one of the worst teams in hockey, and then the calendar flips to the next year and they decide they're the greatest team that's ever existed. That's how they won their cup back in 2019. But then after that, a 5-3 win against Carolina, which is very impressive, and a 2-1 win against Florida, which is also impressive. So the Red Wings are not to be taken lightly at this point. This is going to be a playoff game between these two teams on Tuesday. The Red Wings need it. The Habs need it. This is, if you're building, when they were building the schedule at the beginning of the year, this is what they had hoped for, was that these games were going to matter, and they matter a ton.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we talked about the power play being bad last week. Like, this is a great game for them to try and pick that back up.
Yeah, agreed.
Do some fun things. And then there is no Thursday game this week. Instead, the Canadiens have a back-to-back Ontario road trip, starting with Ottawa on Friday. They play a lot of Ottawa on Friday, I feel like.
Yeah, it's weird.
Way too much. And then the Toronto Maple Leafs on Saturday. I don't know that I'm looking forward to either of those games, because at this late in the season, all I can hear in my head is just injured Canadians.
Yeah, you'd hope not. I mean, the Sens are pretty banged up right now too. Tkachuk, I don't know that he's come back. He's been injured for a little bit. The Sens have been doing just okay without him, so they're in no rush to get him back in the lineup. The Leafs are playing for first in the division, so they still have something to play for. Here's my question, because it seems to be the question of the last couple weeks, maybe month or so. Goaltending. They really want to ride Sam Montembeault, and I get that. I don't think it makes sense to play Dobish in either of these games, and I'll tell you why. Because they then have the Chicago Blackhawks on Monday, the 14th. I would give Montembeault both of those games in Ontario, because they are going to need him in those games. And then he doesn't have to play again until Wednesday against Carolina. You can give him that rest, because you're going to give Dobish the Chicago game, and then Montembeault gets a tune-up before potentially playing game 1 in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Again, cannot believe those words are leaving my mouth, and that they are not a pipe dream, that they are actually a realistic ambition for this team. I'm sorry if it's annoying to people, but I cannot believe we're doing this. I think they ride Montembeault both of those games, and Marty has like a reason to do it.
I never like playing goalies in back-to-backs. I don't
disagree with you.
It rings of like overworking Price, right?
Yeah.
That's just what I think about when the Canadiens do this. But I feel like Marty would go with Montembeault for both. But if he were to give Dobish one, it would seem like Ottawa is the one to do it for. But like,
Agreed.
I feel like you should shake things up. It's not like it's Saturday night at the Bell Center. It's a Saturday night in Toronto. I feel like he should shake it up. I just, because the thing is, like, playing him against Toronto in a game Toronto really wants to win in Toronto is a high pressure situation, and it would send the message that they trust this backup, because I feel like the way that they've handled it has kind of not necessarily made him lose confidence, but the team plays a little bit differently around him right now than they did when he was so good when he first got called up.
Yeah. And look, I mean, I think the Nashville game should give the Canadiens all the confidence in the world that this guy can play. And I don't think it's a lack of confidence that would cause them to play Montembeault in both of those games. I think it's just that those are two marquee matchups that you'd want to get your number one goalie into.
Yeah.
The one thing I want to avoid is, and I've talked about this in the past, when Carey Price was playing and Michel Therrien was the coach, and their backup was Peter Budaj. There were marquee games between the Canadiens and the Bruins when they were both at the height of their powers. And like, it's in the States on national television, and we're getting Peter Budaj in those games. Like, that's the kind of thing I want to avoid, because it just is like, why are you doing that? Like, it doesn't make any sense. I don't disagree with you, though. If you're going to get Dobish into one of those, it's probably the Ottawa game.
Yeah,
on
absolutely.
Friday, and then you give Montembeault the Saturday game against the tougher opponent in Toronto.
And so I think that's it for our weekly preview. It's time for our trivia, and then we'll remind you guys again about the contest.
Yeah, let's do our trivia. So we did this one in honor of Jakob Dobisch making 36 saves against the Nashville Predators on Sunday evening. That is the most in a win for the Montreal Canadiens in Nashville since this goaltender. Laura, do you remember the answer to this one?
It's Jose Theodore.
It sure is. He had 37 saves back on March 10th, 2003. That was 37 saves in that one. Of course, if you recall, Carey Price had 53 saves in Nashville, but it was a 2-0 loss in the most peak Carey Price sort of result you could have had for that era of the Canadiens. That was actually in November of 2009, which is right before Halak Spring. That was right before Yarrow took the team on one of the greatest runs we've seen, in the 2000s. So yeah, it was nice to see a Canadiens goalie make a bunch of saves in Nashville and actually win the game. That was a novel concept. Today's question, I need to point out who got it first. It was Dina Abbas who had that one right. So congrats, Dina. Great job guessing that question. Today's question, in honor of Hutson chasing down Chelios' record with an opportunity to pass him on Tuesday against the Red Wings. We've talked about the rookie scoring for both of these guys, but what about Chelios' swan song? He played a lot into his later years. The last 2 seasons he played in the NHL, I don't think he actually scored any points. He was just kind of around, and he played a few games. But his last point in the NHL was an assist. Who scored the goal that has Chris Chelios' final NHL assist on it? If you have the answer, put it in the comments on YouTube. While you're down there, why don't you hit the subscribe button and write contest entry in the comments for a chance to win our subscriber contest, which is for a signed photo of Josh Anderson once we hit 4,500 subscribers and a signed photo of Arbor Xhekaj once we hit 5,000. So entering down below, just put contest entry, one entry that gets you in. You don't have to keep commenting. I'm keeping track of all of them being put in. So good luck. Thanks for subscribing. We appreciate the support. And again, I want to get rid of these things, so keep entering.
He wants to get rid of these things, and there's already a huge market for them. So make sure you get your contest entries in. And again, it doesn't matter when you subscribed, if you're day one subscriber or if you're a brand new subscriber, as long as you subscribed and you submit your entry, and we are tracking it all. And hopefully one of you wins. So good luck. In the meantime, like I said, make sure you're subscribed, not just for content reasons, so that you don't miss any of the excitement as we watch the Habs try to make the playoffs and potentially do so. You can find our podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. You can also please subscribe, tell your friends. You can also find us all over social media. We're at TikTok on Locked On Canadiens, at Locked On Canadiens. We're on Blue Sky at Locked On Canadiens. We are on Instagram at Locked On Canadiens. And our email address is lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. And you can also submit mailbag questions on any of those channels. Thank you so much for listening. We will be back with a game recap tomorrow.